Welcome, everyone, to a bonus episode of the Medical Nemesis podcast. Today, we are going to give a brief snippet of an interview I recently did on the Pre-PA podcast with Savanna Perry. The Pre-PA podcast, brought to you by the PA platform, is designed for physician assistant and undergrads looking to go into certain healthcare professions. So I thought it was a great platform to get on and try to share some of these materials that are really useful for anyone in healthcare, graduate school, or anything with a lot of information. Here's a brief snippet, and for the full episode, go to thepaplatform.com or download the Pre-PA podcast episode.
Welcome to the Medical Nemesis podcast, your source for memory techniques and accelerated learning in higher education. Now, here's your host, Chase DiMarco.
So where did that interest originally come from when it comes to study techniques? Was that more of a personal thing or seeing others struggle?
Well, I guess it's a combination. So it's a mixture of personal struggle and sort of the educational environment I was in the middle of. So my first semester at medical school, I was really just not appreciating the way things were set up, and I decided to start a website at the time, which was freemeded.org. And it was kind of just a compilation of free materials out there. It's why I called it Free MedEd, so free medical education. And I would take online quizzes and YouTube videos and everything that other people had put up there, free content others had put up there, and just condensed it and organized it to basically follow the class format that my school is having. So myself or fellow students could go there and use these resources to supplement or to replace the resources they were using in school. After the basic sciences, you start taking your board exams, and I was really struggling and realized that despite all of this educational background with my ed psych degree and all the other avenues I've taken with education experiences, the other degrees, I still was really, really struggling just with the quantity of material. Mm-hmm. So I started researching what other techniques are not really being taught in class. What can I add to my own studies schedule to really supplement the education, but also to maybe give me a leg up on certain tasks. It was around this time that I was also diagnosed with dyslexia, so kind of an odd age to run into that, but I just was struggling so much with certain aspects of reading comprehension and memory that I wanted to go get checked out and see if there's anything more serious wrong. And they gave me the diagnosis of that and said, you are going to struggle with certain materials, especially when it comes to reading materials, textbooks. Well, that's a huge part of a lot of medical training, or any healthcare education training. So I had to find something else that was going to help. And that's when I came across a book in the library when I was finishing up a study session on speed reading. Picked up the book and started skimming through it and started doing some more research online, seeing what other classes and resources were available, and really just went down this rabbit hole for a couple of weeks, finding different speed reading techniques, different mnemonic techniques, different training resources that are out there that a lot of people really praised. So I started experimenting with it a little bit.
With the studying thing, so my husband is a physician. He just finished residency. So I kind of watched him go through things. Went through PA school at the same time. We were in undergrad together, and we studied completely differently. And I don't know that it took me a very long time to figure out what works for me. And even then, I don't know that it was the best or most efficient way of studying. So it sounds like a lot of your studying techniques and tips are kind of about the efficiency of studying when you're in these, especially grad level programs where, you're getting thrown tons of material, tons of tests really, really quickly.
These techniques were initially supposed to help kind of organize and synthesize the material in a new way, in a way that was more visual for me, because I struggle with text. I struggle with textbooks, with reading. That is not my learning style. And, most people have heard of the VARC, visual audio reading kinesthetic learning style. It's technically not a real thing. It's kind of been disproven as a teaching method. You should implement all of them in your studies. Okay. But if I was to be closer to one, it would definitely be visual. So learning some of these visual mnemonic techniques, which is kind of what speed reading led me into, is what really helps. So a lot of students probably are aware of either Picmonic or Sketchy, and luckily I've had both of those guys on, well, multiple guys from those shows, and also Osmosis is doing a lot of stuff in visual mnemonics. I've had all of them on the show kind of explaining their different techniques for it, and everyone has a different technique. Every single person I interview has a different way they approach it, and that's great. And that gives students the experience from a multitude of different experts. So there's not just one way to approach these if you're trying to make your own. There's many different ways, and you just really have to play around with it for a while.
So if someone is, okay, I think everyone has struggled with studying at some point, whether you are in a class with a teacher that you don't really groove with their learning style or their testing style, or, it's just material you haven't really been exposed to. How can someone initially, figure out what works best for them? Are there tests or things they can do?
Well, when it comes to that, it is really tricky, and everyone you talk to is going to say something different. And unfortunately, to my knowledge, there's no validated test that's going to say what is the exact best method, because there's just too many different methods depending on the type of material. So my advice is generally to try a little bit of everything, and also to try them in a few different scenarios, because what really didn't work over here might work really good over there. So between the different more accelerated learning techniques is kind of what I chunk speed reading and mnemonics into. There are some really good evidence-based methods of education, and a lot of these I was lucky enough to have interviews on from such as the Learning Scientist group, and they have a podcast that has a lot of this material, so you can look there and look on my podcast. But Dr. Megan Samaraki was on an earlier episode of mine, and a few other people that talk about the cognitive psychology of learning, which is a great supplement to this. So you can use these different tools and techniques, but then you can actually add the evidence-based science behind which ones you might want to do more often.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that brief snippet. Again, for the full episode, go to the Pre-PA podcast, brought to you by the PA platform, for the entire episode, in which we cover a lot more details. You get more personal history about myself and my personal struggles, how the medical mnemonist started, how free med ed started, and a lot more general information. It's really cool material. I highly suggest it. And by going to listen to that and leaving your comments and reviews, you can help support our show. You can let them know that you enjoy the content and maybe want me to come back sometime and talk about some more in-depth content. Also, since some of our episodes were recently put out of order for things outside of our control, the book giveaway that we're currently hosting, some things kind of got mixed up. So we're going to extend the book giveaway for a couple of weeks. And hopefully that'll give people more time, since some of our episodes now came out of order. So if you hear anything with the intros and outros that might be out of sync, that could be why. For more information on the book giveaway, please go to book.freemeded.org/giveaway. Again, that's book.freemeded.org/giveaway. That, as well as the links for the Pre-PA podcast, can be found in the show notes of this episode as well. All right, we'll see you in a few days for our normally scheduled programming.